America is playing Russian roulette with its economy, and the gun is loaded with more bullets than ever before. For every $100 the US economy produces, the government spends an extra $7 it doesn't have. This is a 7% GDP deficit, and it screams reckless government overspending. This $36 trillion debt bomb has been ticking for over 40 years. But now, we're closer to detonation than ever before. This warning comes from Jamie Dimon, the CEO of JP Morgan Chase, and he is sounding the alarm that America's debt has reached a critical breaking point, one that could trigger consequences more severe than any crisis he's navigated in his 19-year tenure. Listen to him explain why we are running out of time.
I think what you should worry about is the deficit today is 7% of GDP. When Volcker was around and we had very high inflation, it was 3.5%. The debt to GDP is 35% back then, 1982. It's 100% today. The deficits today, the biggest peacetime deficit we ever ran. Deficits by their nature are inflationary. And at one point we have to deal with this.
Currently, for every $100 the US economy produces, the government spends an extra $7 beyond its income. This is a 7% GDP deficit, and it screams reckless government overspending. This is why Jamie Dimon is sounding the alarm. He doesn't mince words, arguing that the government is burning through cash like wildfire, and we desperately need leaders who can steer us away from this financial cliff. Dimon throws in a stark reminder about the past. Even when inflation ran rampant in the 1980s, the US debt to GDP ratio was a mere 35%. That's right, a fraction of what it is today. As of making this video, America's debt to GDP ratio has hit a critical level, 123%. Imagine if your credit card debt was equal to your entire annual salary. That's essentially the situation America's in right now. Its national debt equals the entire value of its economy in a single year. Everything produced, every service rendered, every dollar earned, all consumed by debt. It's like being in a never-ending cycle of minimum payments with no room to breathe, let alone invest in the future. Let's take a closer look at what Dimon has to say about fixing this problem before it's too late.
I would beg the government to set up a powerful Simpson balls type of committee authorized by the Congress, up or down vote. It's probably the only way to do it. The other way to do it is wait until there's some kind of disaster in the market, and then you're kind of forced to do it at the wrong time. And I don't know when that might be.
Dimon lays out two possible paths the US can take to escape this looming crisis. One is a daring tightrope walk requiring political courage and compromise. The other is a terrifying freefall into economic chaos. Let's start with Dimon's preferred solution. To tackle this $36 trillion debt crisis, Dimon says we need to go straight to the source, the government. After all, they're the ones who control the purse strings and dictate how the money is spent. His solution? Create a powerful bipartisan committee. That means members from both political parties working together, like the Simpson-Bowles Commission formed back in 2010. Back in 2010, the US faced a ballooning deficit in the aftermath of the Great Recession of 2008 and 2009. That commission brought together top leaders from both sides of the aisle to find common ground on incredibly tough issues. They actually managed to agree on a plan to reduce the deficit by nearly $4 trillion. Unfortunately, the plan ultimately failed to get enough votes in Congress. But its success in forging a compromise in a highly partisan environment is exactly why Dimon thinks it's a model worth revisiting. The alternative is to wait for a market catastrophe to force our hand. It's like waiting for a heart attack to finally commit to a healthy lifestyle. But this economic heart attack won't just bring temporary discomfort. We are talking about potentially crippling consequences. Soaring interest rates that strangle businesses, crush families under mountains of debt, and trigger a financial crisis that could ripple across the globe. What's even more alarming is that full consequences of this massive deficit haven't been felt yet. We're living in a deceptive calm before the storm, lulled into a false sense of security. Listen to what Dimon has to say about this looming threat.
I'm so glad you brought up the deficit. I watched the Treasury auctions. There's another 3-year one today. I watch them every time wondering, are we going to start seeing disruption from some of the concerns that that you bring up, but also every single investor who I speak to says the same thing. Are you surprised that the market hasn't priced in a higher structural deficit in the way of higher yields or at least more volatility, at least at auctions?
Yeah, well, I have a lot of comments on that one. Commodity markets often don't price things in until they actually happen. And so it hasn't happened yet. The higher inflation, the higher structural stuff, even though the deficits are there. There's also sentiment, inventory, supply and demand of capital goods. So it's very hard to say. But that's why I think that longer rates may actually stay here and tick up a little bit as opposed to go down, because of these huge deficits in the United States.
Dimon points out that markets, particularly commodity markets, where raw materials like oil, wheat and gold are traded, often don't fully reflect future risks until those risks become reality. Think of it like this: if experts warn that political instability in a major oil-producing country could disrupt supply, oil prices might increase slightly due to the uncertainty. But the real price spike happens when a conflict erupts, when oil fields are attacked and gas prices at the pump suddenly skyrocket. This is because commodity markets react to immediate supply and demand, and the true scarcity of a resource often isn't clear until a crisis hits. Dimon highlights that market behavior isn't just driven by cold, hard data like deficit numbers. Factors like investor sentiment, how optimistic or pessimistic people feel, inventory levels, how much of a product businesses have sitting in their warehouses ready to sell, and the overall supply and demand for capital, how much money is available for businesses to invest and grow, all play a role. Dimon is essentially saying that the market hasn't fully grasped the potential consequences of the high deficit yet. He believes as those consequences become clearer, we could see increased market volatility and potentially a negative impact on the economic growth. This is another reason why he stresses the need for proactive measures to address the deficit now, before the market forces a more painful adjustment. Dimon's warning isn't just another financial forecast. It's a wake-up call from someone who's navigated every major crisis for the past 2 decades. The deficit bomb is already ticking. The question isn't whether it will explode, but when. And the longer it's ignored, the more devastating the blast will be.